the perspective of people embedded and rooted in the Eritrean culture, who are now in this country. People are going to tell it from the perspective of being refugees and being on that journey, what that's meant to them in their lives. So there will be some very challenging moments as we hear about the reality of this experience for different people. Over Christmas, I read Martin Plaut's book about Eritrea. And this is not saying anything about Martin's style of writing, but I have to say it was a book that had very, very little in the way of glimmers of hope in it. It's a difficult read to read the history of this very difficult country. And Martin has spent time in Eritrea, spent a lot of time in the Horn of Africa, really is regarded as a journalist who has unique expertise and knowledge about this region. And it's a wonderful privilege to have Martin with us to share something about that this evening. So can I ask you to give Martin a very warm welcome as he comes to share something about Eritrea with us this evening.
Well, thank you very much, Father John, and thank you very much for inviting me here. It's a great privilege to be with you, and I hope that my Eritrean friends here will correct me if I get things wrong and forgive me, and I look forward to sharing some of the things that I learned in the nearly 30 or maybe even 40 years that I've worked on Eritrea, which began when a young Eritrean came into my office. I was working at the Labour Party in the international division, and he said, "You must come to my country." And I said, "But there's a war." And he said, "Don't worry, come. You get to Port Sudan, we'll look after you." And I went, and it was an extraordinary experience. For non-Eritreans, let me just say a couple of words about the country itself, so you have a little bit of a picture. It's a country of about 3.6 million people, although there has been no census for many, many years, so nobody can be absolutely sure. It's a country at peace, and yet it is hemorrhaging people. When the borders were opened with Ethiopia, something like 500 people a day left across the borders, and more flew up as well. So you have to ask yourself, why would people leave such a lovely country with magnificent beaches, with lovely cities, at peace, and in a sense, with a country where half the population is Christian, about half are Muslim, and yet there are no real major tensions between the religious groups, unlike so many other countries. Why are they streaming out of it? And it is a really sad story. Just to give you a little bit of an insight into it, I thought I would refer to a statement from Mike Smith, who was the chair of the UN Commission on Human Rights in Eritrea. This is what he said in introducing his second report in 2016. The first report is nearly 500 pages long, which I won't be reading. This was his conclusion. The Human Rights Council has asked us to determine whether the violations that we documented in our first report amount to crimes against humanity and to address the issue of accountability. The Commission has concluded that Eritrean officials have committed crimes against humanity, crimes of enslavement, imprisonment, enforced disappearance, torture, persecution, rape, murder, and other inhuman acts, have been committed as part of a widespread and systemic campaign since 1991 aimed at maintaining control over the population, perpetuating the Eritrean leadership's rule. The Commission has made every effort to investigate the situation and report fairly, including with respect to serious human rights violations in Eritrea since the publication of our first report. Unfortunately, the gross human rights violations we have documented are continuing to take place. They often happen behind closed doors and continue to instill fear in Eritreans, not only in the country, but also in the diaspora. And I'm sure that many of you in the diaspora can attest to the pressure that sometimes is exerted on you, even in Britain. As you know, it is a country which has had a wonderful and a sad history. Sad in that it is a country which fought for 30 years for its independence from Ethiopia. It was given to Ethiopia under the United Nations mandate as to be united with Ethiopia, but to retain its integrity. Britain held it from when it took it from the Italians in the 1940s during the Second World War, and then after the war it was left in a situation where they didn't know quite what to do. So they turned to the United Nations. The United Nations said there should be a federal structure with Ethiopia. Unfortunately, Haile Selassie ended this and incorporated in Plaut in Ethiopia. And in 1960, the Eritrean people, 1961, the Eritrean people launched the Liberation Army, which continued for 30 years. First backed by the Americans and then backed by the Soviet Union. The Ethiopians did their very best to crush this resistance. They never succeeded. And in 1991, in alliance with Ethiopian rebel movements, they took both the capital of Eritrea, Asmara, and they took the capital of Addis Ababa. And it was a moment of extraordinary optimism and hope that the future would now be clear. Unfortunately, it didn't quite turn out that way, and by 1998, so just 7 years later, there was another border war, again with Ethiopia. Something like 100,000 people died in that conflict. I can go into the reasons for it, but they're very complicated, but essentially they died. And at the end of that, the key town over which the war had been fought against ostensibly was awarded to Eritrea. But the Ethiopians refused to accept the binding arbitration which had been handed out by the Boundary Commission. And from that moment onwards, there was a sort of no war, no peace that existed between Eritrea and Ethiopia, with tens of thousands of troops, conscripts, young men and women on both sides of that border. It's 1,000 kilometers long. And they sat in those trenches year after year after year without any hope that they were ever going to get anywhere. And what I'm going to now describe is how the situation has been transformed, because it really has been transformed, at least in some respects. And that is what I'm going to try and do now, and then I'll leave it, and if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them. On the 15th of January last year, Ethiopian Prime Minister Haile stepped down and was replaced by Abiy Ahmed. An Oromo with a background in the Ethiopian security services, he immediately set forth transforming his country. He engaged in a series of visits abroad to Ethiopia's neighbours, strengthened deals with them on transport links and access to the sea. In June 2018, Prime Minister Abiy took the dramatic step of ending Ethiopia's long-standing rejection of the Boundary Commission decision on the border with Eritrea. The Ethiopian government officially announced that it would fully accept and put into operation the Algiers Accord, which ended the terrible border war that I described a moment ago. At a stroke, relations between the two countries were transformed. There had been speculation that this U-turn would come for months, if not years. In reality, it was the result of lengthy and complex negotiations. Contacts had been initiated between President Isaias of Eritrea and Ethiopian Prime Minister Haile Mariam. It was reported that Ethiopia had set up a committee headed by the former president with expert advice, and they were supported by the Ethiopian clergy. The initiative was quietly backed by the United States, the European Union, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. Meetings are said to have been held in Washington, with both sides facilitated by Don Yamamoto, who is one of the State Department's most senior diplomats with extensive African expertise. In December 2017, Yamamoto announced that the US was actively committed to supporting a resumption of the peace talks between Ethiopia and Eritrea after both countries reiterated their readiness to resolve their border dispute. This was followed in April 2018 by a visit by Yamamoto to Eritrea, Djibouti and Ethiopia. The State Department refused to say very much about what had happened, but it appears that it set the seal on Prime Minister Abiy's dramatic gesture 2 months later. So too did aid. Upon taking up his office in April, Prime Minister Abiy secured $3 billion in aid and investment from the UAE, including $1 billion deposited in the country's central bank. Eritrea is likely to have received similar sums, but we don't know how much. With the Ethiopians finally accepting the border, relations with Eritrea were, as I said, transformed. On June the 8th, Prime Minister Abiy made the first visit to Eritrea by an Ethiopian leader for 20 years. The reception he received was ecstatic. Crowds lined the streets of Asmara waving Eritrean and Ethiopian flags. Even the taciturn President Isaias was seen grinning broadly and introducing Abiy Ahmed to his grandchildren and grandchildren. On the 14th of June, President Isaias made a return visit to Ethiopia. His welcome in Addis Ababa was just as enthusiastic. Speaking at a lunch hosted by Prime Minister Abiy, President Isaias said that history was being made, following an agreement that would see diplomatic and trade relations restored and result in the resumption of flights between the two countries. Words cannot express the joy we are feeling. It was almost as if the tragic border war, years of mutual hostility, had never occurred. Flights between Addis Ababa and Asmara were resumed. Hordes of Ethiopians made the trip to gaze in wonder at the beauties of Asmara's Art Deco buildings and drink coffee in its cafes. There were tearful reunions as families that had been separated for 2 decades were reunited. Phone lines were restored. The roads between the two countries were reopened, and soon Ethiopian merchants were plying their trade in Eritrean towns and villages, returning with manufactured goods brought in from the Gulf. The relationship was cemented in a lavish ceremony in Saudi Arabia in September 2018. Saudi King Salman hosted the event, which was attended by his son, Crown Prince, and United Nations Secretary General Guterres. The agreement the two leaders signed promised they would respect each other's independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity, and spoke of lasting peace between the nations. The treaty contains 7 articles, ending war and pledging cooperation. Its most significant provision was one establishing a mechanism for determining the border between the two countries. Quote, the two countries will establish a high-level joint committee as well as subcommittees as required to guide and oversee the implementation of this agreement. The rapprochement between the two countries has been welcomed across the world. Eritrea has been given a seat at the United Nations Human Rights Council and is taking a lead in relation with the European Union via the Khartoum process. A stream of Western ministers has visited Asmara, posing for photographs with President Isaias as they offer aid to build the country. The agreement also has potential economic benefits for Eritrea. With the land border between the two countries reopened, many Eritreans took the opportunity to leave. According to the UN Refugee Agency, arrivals from Eritrea in Ethiopia soared. Between the 12th of September and the 2nd of October alone, over 10,000 people entered reception camps in Ethiopia. On some days, as I said, 500 people crossed the border every day. They were accommodated in border camps, and Ethiopia has now very generously passed a law allowing refugees to work and live in other parts of the country. It's not clear how long this exodus will continue. What is apparent is that progress has been, what is less apparent is what progress has been made on Article 7, the work of the committee and the subcommittee to implement the Saudi agreement, and there are many obstacles to overcome. Firstly, There are many border committees that have to be transferred from one country to another, depending on where the boundary lies. This was laid out, as I said, at the end of the border war by a boundary commission. It's not clear how this will take place or how the communities themselves will react to having to answer to another capital. It would, of course, be possible for Eritrea and Ethiopia to vary the border by mutual consent. But will this really happen after so much blood has been spilled? It's hard to believe that Eritrea will be willing to give up their claim to the village of Badme, over which the terrible border war was fought. But it's not impossible. Secondly, with relations between the two countries having been healed, the same cannot be said between the Eritreans and the Tigrayan movements that fought side by side to liberate Asmara and Addis Ababa in 1991. The narrative from the Eritrean authorities is that the problem was only with the Tigrayans. Relations with the rest of Ethiopia were always fine. Once the Tigrayan People's Liberation Front lost power in Addis Ababa, the obstacles were removed. The Tigrayans are very wary about their northern neighbours as well, having spent long days in internal debates about how to react to the changes. When the Ethiopian army attempted to remove heavy artillery placed along the border, Tigrayans demonstrated in large numbers, blocking the roads and preventing the removal. The Tigrayans feared another incursion from Eritrea if relations deteriorate. Thirdly, Eritreans worry there is now a question mark over the sovereignty of their own country. These concerns arose over President Isaias' reaction to the arrival of Prime Minister Abiy in Asmara in June 2018. The issue was pithily described by the Eritrean commentator Abraham Zere, and I quote, "Given the opaque way in which the regime governs, Eritreans are used to following Isaias' words and actions carefully in search of any hint. But for even those unaccustomed to observing him, his recent performance in Ethiopia was startling. He appeared out of character, praising the leader of his longtime foe excessively and proclaiming that the two nations were now one people. He said remarkably that he told Abiy, 'You are our leader,' and announced happily to the crowd, 'I'll give him all responsibility for leadership and power.' It was not long ago, it was unthinkable that Isaias, a man who played a leading role in Eritrea's battle for independence and based his leadership on the need to protect against Ethiopia, might one day shake hands with his counterpart in Addis Ababa. But now, some Eritreans are afraid that the president might be about to declare Eritrea reunited with Ethiopia. The future relationship between the two countries is cloudy. Ethiopia has access to Eritrea's ports. There have been suggestions that an Ethiopian navy will operate out of Massawa or Assab. But if this takes place, which country will exercise control over it? Eritrean concerns were heightened in February 2019 when Prime Minister Abiy went further. Speaking about Eritrea, he said, "Far from Ethiopia breaking up, even those ones that have been separated will return. It will be only a matter of time. We're only getting to be bigger and stronger. I have no doubt about that." Where this is leading is unclear, but Eritrean nationalists are wary. That's the situation in relation between the two states, but what about internally? Since relations with Ethiopia have been restored, the threat to Eritrea has been removed. The oft-repeated claim that it cannot introduce democratic reforms since it's facing an existential threat from abroad no longer applies. The apparent reason for indefinite national service that has trapped tens of thousands of young people in a conscript army has ended. While Eritrean ministers and ambassadors have repeatedly told Western diplomats and visiting dignitaries that national service will be reduced to 18 months, this has not been enacted. There are also reports of unrest inside Eritrea. In November 2017, a protest against the government's attempts to take control of a Muslim school in the capital took place. Leaders of the Daya Islamic school in Asmara defied the government's orders to remove religion from their curricula. The elderly president of the school board, Haji, I'm sorry, I get his name wrong, Musa Muhammad Nur, voiced the school's resistance in a widely shared video. "We are not going to change anything," he told the crowd, which applauded loudly. The security forces intervened, cracked down on the protests, but not before the images of the resistance had been shared across the world. Haji Musa was among those who were arrested, and I believe he died in prison in March 2018. The other major events that have taken place was an attempted assassination of General Sephat Ephraim, former Minister of Defense and current Minister of Mining, in December 2018. Who carried out the attack is not clear, and he's reportedly recovering from a gunshot wound in Abu Dhabi. President Assas, whose control over the flows of official information is almost total, has appeared on national television, but his interviews have been as opaque as ever. Eritreans are ignorant of the future direction of their country. In the meantime, the parliament does not meet, the constitution has not been enacted, and political prisoners languish in jail. Freedom and rule of law promised by the Eritrean People's Liberation Front during the long years of liberation struggle are absent, and the future of Eritrea is as unclear as it has ever been. Thank you.
At the end of the session, so if you want to store up any questions you have for Martin or any of the other speakers as they share with us this evening, then store them up and there'll be a chance to ask some of them at the end of the session. But thank you, Martin, for trying to guide us through this incredibly complex picture, this sort of political melting pot of things going on that in some ways seem very positive, but the actual experience on the ground for Eritreans is still very, very negative, which is why so many Eritreans do still leave the country and look for new places to call home. Some of whom are here in London with us, of course, and our brothers and sisters here that we are getting to know maybe better. And Father Shenouda is going to come and share just a little bit with us about the experience of being in London, of being part of an Eritrean community, the issues that community faces, the struggles and both the joys, I hope. Might be some joy in this as well, or being here in London as an Eritrean community. So Father Shenouda, do come and speak.
In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, Amen. Thank you so much. I would like to thank Reverend John for making this day to be a great day to gather all and the congregation of St. Stephen, and to all of you brothers and sisters who make this day to attend, to listen to the pain and suffer of the Eritrean people, and to see the challenge that is facing our people as well. And thank you so much for our MP Emily to attend us and to listen to our pain. Thank you so much. I would like to speak of the challenges that's facing us in London, the challenges especially for the young refugees who they were not educated properly, who doesn't have an experience properly, and they're new. They face, when they come to the West, it's a big challenge. So I would like to share my own experience. Most of the young Eritrean refugees who they came into Europe and especially into England, they experienced a lot of horrific experiences and problems. Many of them, they saw their friends who they were with them being shot, being tortured, and to personal level, they've been raped. So they got that kind of horrendous problems when they came there into this country with a linguistic problem and cultural gap. Most of them, they feel a lot of problems. And as I think last year, two of the young refugees, they commit suicide because no one understands with the cultural problems and the linguistic problems as well. Another, from personal experience as well, other solicitors, they don't know the case properly. Most of them with unsuccessful papers. They've been left for years and years. They can't go to college and they cannot work, so they left behind. And at a personal level, with the government campaign, most of the people, they fear to come to the church. Especially, my church is based in Archway, and we stand firmly with our people against the work of the government. So they fear to come to the church. And with our limited resources, and with our limited staff, we push ourselves to serve our people who are in different places, who are living in a busy country, in a busy city. We manage to serve them. So from here, I appeal to support our community and to support us to reach our people and to strengthen them. Otherwise, they will be left behind and they will be into alcoholism or other stuff or into mental issues. So there is a lot of problems, but we will need your support. As is written in the Epistle of St. Paul, when one part of the body suffers, the entire body suffers. When first time I met months ago Reverend John, I saw the heart of support, the heart of opening the doors to reach the people. So I'm expecting and I'm appealing to you to help us and to be supportive with us. And when we see to these challenges as well, the service. When we make service, it's very hard for them to come into the church because they live into a different place which is far. For example, in the far the west or the far the west, they come, it's very hard for them. There is a lot of challenges, but through your prayers and through your support, we believe that we will overcome. And one day, as I was talking with Reverend John, they built a school in Africa. We believe that through your support, one day we are going to build Eritrea once a bright and once a country full of future. So may the Lord bless you all. I have a little time to share with you, and may the Lord bless us to work with help and support. And thank you for listening.